For me, I have this deep conviction. You'll sometimes hear people say, in the 21st century, we use computers as a metaphor for brains or for mind or, cognition. And this is no different to the way that in the past, people in the early 20th century used, pneumatic tubes as a metaphor, or in the middle
Right.
20th century, they used sort of electricity and wiring. And, before that, they used gears and,
And whatever the cutting edge technology is becomes the metaphor to describe what complexity is.
Yeah. And so, there's a skeptical position that says AI is just the latest in a series of kind of bullshit metaphors for the mind that aren't going to reveal anything. The same way that, like, if someone goes on a, rampage, we might say that they've blown a fuse, but like electrical engineering doesn't tell us anything about the brain. So I'm setting this position up because I don't agree. I'm willing to be proven wrong, but I genuinely think that we are sort of on to some philosophical pay dirt here. I think there is a very real way in which we are building these systems in our own image. And as a result, they come to be a kind of mirror for ourselves in a way that's genuinely revelatory, not just interesting. But this is how we're going to sort of figure out what the nature of mind is. I think it's very telling, in my view, that really one of the first ideas that anyone ever had in AI was the idea of artificial neural networks. This idea comes from the 1940s, like 1942, 43. It predates the first stored program computer. It predates, the Dartmouth conference that's considered to begin the, field of AI by a decade. And okay, it wasn't until, I would argue, 2012 that this idea was fully kind of vindicated.
Yeah.
But the fact that the dominant paradigm in AI at this point was A, the first idea anyone had, and B, the most kind of directly biologically inspired idea that anyone had, I think that's extremely telling. And I can give you other examples. One of my favorites is there was this idea in a subfield of AI called reinforcement learning, which is about how do you learn from punishments and rewards.
Yeah.
And there's a particular approach to this that's called temporal difference learning, that basically says you can learn from changes in your prediction of some future thing before that thing even happens. So if today I think that next weekend will be sunny, but then tomorrow I think actually it's going to rain, I can sort of retroactively update, saying that yesterday I probably should have thought what I think today.
Right.
Because today's prediction is probably more accurate, even though we don't yet know the final outcome. So this is called temporal difference learning, or TD learning.
Right.
The math of this was being worked out by a bunch of people in the AI community in Cambridge. And then in the 90s, one of them, Peter Dayan by name, goes to the Salk Institute and is working with a bunch of neuroscientists. And they are hung up on the question of what in the hell does the dopamine system do? We had all this great data from the 80s and 90s on the individual behavior of dopamine neurons. They seem to kind of correlate to reward, a monkey would have this dopamine spike when the monkey discovers some food, but then you repeat the study again and again and the dopamine goes away. So, okay, it's not exactly reward, it's not exactly surprise, but it's clearly connected to those things. So what's going on? It was this huge riddle. The AI community, Peter Dayan, took one look at this data and basically said, oh, that's temporal difference learning.
Right. A diminishing return on something as you get closer to the future prediction of what that is.
Yeah, it doesn't reflect how good the situation is, but rather whether the situation is more or less promising than you thought it was going to be.
Oh, right.
And so I tell this story. It's one of my favorite anecdotes within, recent AI history. For me, this underscores this conviction of we really are onto something in terms of AI as revealing the mechanisms of the mind. We are independently rediscovering some of the same fundamental mechanisms that evolution found time and again. There are many kind of parallel convergent evolutions of this kind of TD learning system in various branches of the animal kingdom, and we're finding that indeed those are the same solutions that work in AI. So this is just a very deep conviction of mine that we're really onto something.
Hey, it's MBS here. My newsletter is The Works with MBS. Every week I take a key tool, insight, metaphor, and make it an essential distillation so that you can unlock your greatness. If that sounds interesting, sign up at mbs.works.